let me start out with. My name is Doug Eisenhart. You probably have seen me at athletic events. If you're in the college business, you see me over there. Been here 12 years. 12 years ago, I was a student at UCA, an old one, getting my MBA. And someone's performance evaluation was really bad in the college business. And they didn't have tenure, and they were terminated. And I had just finished my MBA, and the chair said, would you like to teach for 2 semesters because we can't keep you because you're not qualified academically. But you can teach 2 semesters while we find somebody. I said, sure, I'll do it. I am a non-tenure track. I'm in my 12th year of 1-year appointments. But the entitlement programs are kicking in, so I'm in good shape. So I used to do a lot of this stuff in the private sector, and I know that you don't want to be here. That much I know. How many of you really want to be here? Come on, honest with me. Tell me. Okay? This is a hostage situation. I can handle it. Now, one of the things we're going to have you do is get in, this is a terrible place to do this, but we want to get in groups of about 5 people, because you're going to be the show today. Okay? A boss I had, a vice president back when I worked in the private sector, told me this when I was about 30 years old. He said, let's not talk about money when we talk about your performance evaluation. Your performance will take care of that. The good news is we don't have to worry about money, right? We can just zero in on performance. So raise your hand if you think UCA is the best employer. Oh, we usually have you close your eyes. Close your eyes. Don't look, don't look. And raise your hand if you think UCA is the best employer. Okay. That's...
Does you qualify that?
No. It's just a loaded question. Oh, okay. So the next thing is, how many of you have been here more than 5 years? Raise your hand. Wow. Okay, 10 years. Keep your hands up. 10 years? 15? 20? Why are you here? You know all this stuff, right? You're supervisors, right? Supervisor? Okay. So why is UCA the best or why not? You don't have to answer that. For most, UCA equals my boss, the person I work next to for over 50% of my waking hours, right? If you're here 8, 9, 10 hours, that's UCA. So if you get a good one, it's a great place. You get a not so good one, you probably want to leave. Right? How many have worked someplace else? Ah, wow. That's good. So you have a comparison, and you're still here. What's the 2 things you can do if you don't like your job? Exit, quit, and voice is the other one. I teach a lot of labor relations stuff, and workers, especially like hourly workers, that's the 2 choices I always have, exit or voice. And voice is who's your representative you can go talk to. Where do you go up the chain of command? Right? You can go right to Tom's office. Got an open door. Yeah? It'd be nice if you go through the levels, though, before you get to him. These are questions for you. What's more important than giving performance feedback to your workers? You got something more important? It's so important that we're dedicating an entire hour to it today. Actually, 2 hours, because Graham's back there. Okay. What exactly is being measured? What are the expectations? Just think about yourself. Can you, on a piece of paper, write down what is expected of you? What are you being measured on? Why are you here? And how do you know you're meeting those things? Well, hopefully a performance evaluation will include all of those things. So what objective criteria, standards, and measurements are documented for each position? Do you have documentation for every position that reports to you? Yes? No? Yes? And that's what you use for evaluation? Okay. Are the standards reviewed and revised over time? I asked that question because a couple of years ago I asked an associate of mine, when's the last time we changed curriculum in a management major? Remember, I've been here, at the time I've been here over 10 years. And he said, I've been here 19 years, I can't think of anything. Then he said, no, the major used to be 15 hours and we moved it to 24. So we're not keeping up with a lot of stuff. Now there's a lot of activity. I would venture to guess that you're on some kind of Spark committee and you're working towards some big time improvements for the future. Okay. Some little tidbits. Focus on outcomes, not efforts. Some people get really upset when I tell them that hard work is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for results. Look at an athletic team. Everybody out there works hard as they can in practice. When they get in the game, they work really hard. Are they all Michael Jordans? No, they're not going to be. So focus on outcomes and results. If you don't have these measurements down, you don't have standards, you don't have expectations, you can't tell a person, or your boss can't tell you, what is your outcome. You say, I worked hard last year, and what did I get? We all got $1,000, right? Whether you worked hard or didn't work hard, we all got $1,000. Everybody got the same amount of money. Because we all go to Walmart and buy groceries, and it costs the same for all of us, right? Okay? We could have used the old formula, percentage, whatever, but everybody got the same amount. So everybody got more money last year than the year before. USDA's performance uses a U, S, A, and E. I've never filled one of these out. I don't supervise anybody. But in the past I have, in other places. So we use it. So if you get an S, what do you think? Is that like equal to a C in a course? How many of you think that? I see a few heads nodding. Yeah, that's a hurdle that you have to get over with your with the employees you're evaluating, is that if you get an S, that's what you're supposed to do. You're doing what you're supposed to do. People don't like to get S's, though, do they? How many like to get an S? What do you like to get? Well, that's a tough crowd. Wow. You want to know the #1 Google search at UCA this weekend? How do I delete all websites I've ever looked at? Do you perceive evaluation to be objective or subjective? What? Subjective? Objective. Okay, show of hands. We'll do it for you. See if our arms work. Who think that performance evaluations are objective? I guess we don't need to raise any more hands. I got 2 here in front that said that. The rest of you either don't know, don't care, or you think that they're subjective. Again, if you don't have standards, you don't have expectations, you don't have goals and objectives written down somewhere, it can't be objective. So if it's subjective, you might think of what happened in the last week, maybe month. That's about as far back as you're probably going to go. So this person did something really, really great. They might get an S. I mean, not an S, an E. Right? I didn't like E's, and we used to have E's in the school I went to. I went to a one-room schoolhouse for 7 years. Okay. Can you name anyone from your department who's terminated for a U performance rating? I'm seeing heads go like this. I'm seeing just blank stares. Where I'm leading to is, if this is a valuable process, and we want to make it a valuable process, and it's a meaningful process, out of 1,335 people, somebody must have got a U. If they got a U, and they continue to get a U, are they still here? We don't know. But the question is, can you name anyone from your department who's terminated? Or placed on probation? You got a couple heads for probation. Okay. So people are getting some feedback. Money is not available for pay increases based on performance. Why should evaluations be completed? This is a controversial thing. Not just here, it's everywhere. Everywhere I've ever worked, anybody I've ever visited, any supervisor that's saying, I'm going to get an evaluation, and the next thing is at the end of that, I'm going to get an increase. Progressive organizations have removed those two. Not real successfully, but they've attempted it. Because they should not be linked. Especially here. Because there's no money. But you still should have performance evaluations. It's like Little League. How many of you have coached Little League anything? Okay. Do you ever remember the day you said, we're not going to keep score, this is just a scrimmage? And they said to themselves, the hell we're not. We know who won. We're going to keep track of who won. Well, as we're adults, we want to know if we're winning, right? So we need to have the evaluation, and you don't have to have it once a year. Most of us see our supervisors every day. All right, so this is the formal part. This is what goes in your personnel file. This is what's important after your boss leaves and you get a new one, or you move to another department. That personnel folder has your work history in it. And if it's done properly, it's going to be your performance throughout the whole year, all the years that you worked here. There's a market for everything, including labor. You're being paid at UCA what you're worth in this market for the job that you do. Graham and all his people go out and do surveys, and it says for this market, for this job, this is the market. This is what the pay is. And there's ranges, of course, in there. You know, if you were doing this job in San Francisco, California, same job, you'd probably be paid more, obviously. If you're in Philadelphia, my daughter moved Saturday to Baltimore for her work. And she went through a whole bunch of budgeting stuff, and I helped her. And she's going to have to dig into her savings every month. But she couldn't find a job around here that would pay her bills. So she moved. Okay, so what are you doing to get the best performance from your team? I know you get up every morning, Monday through Friday, and as you're driving to work, you're saying that. Is it, today, I'm going to get the best performance from my team. Why are we here? What is it that we're paid to do? That's why we do evaluations. That's a good time to talk about that. Okay. Everybody is going to get a scenario, and your team of, these are things that I have experienced in my lifetime. So I didn't have to go to websites or textbooks, and you're only going to get one. There's a total of 11. Here's the way it's going to work. A group of 4, 5, 6 of you, whatever, will get one, and you'll talk about it just for 5 minutes. And we're going to have a total of 11 of them out there. So there will be probably some duplicates. There will be more than one team doing scenario number one. Okay? This is scenario one. You can all see this as you get through what each of these team captains are going to tell you that they're going to do. Yeah, they need to talk about it. Okay, so let's go through it quickly. John, 21-year veteran, worker, stellar performance record, well-documented previous performance evaluation. Missed work an average of 1 day per week for the last 60 days. Velma has not talked to John about the absence because she was waiting for the time to complete the annual performance reviews for all 11 employees in her department.
My group of incredible managers at the back, we concluded the first thing.
They're outside the lines.
Well, we needed to have a quiet space, and inside the lines it was
Did you call
rowdy.
her outside the lines? Okay.
We concluded that it's well overdue for Velma to talk to John privately about what's going on and respond accordingly to how that conversation goes.
Yeah, something happened in his behavior, and it could be 9 months before you do his evaluation. You don't want to wait. Okay?
Yeah, we basically said the same thing. Velma's dropped the ball, and she needs to sit down, not wait another day, go ahead and sit down with John and figure out what's going on. Could be all sorts of reasons.
In this instance, this person, Velma, didn't like to do evaluations, and I don't imagine many of you do either. It's hard. Why is it hard? Because you're going to have to sit down and do the hardest form of communication, whether it's with your spouse, your children, or the people you work with, or the people you work for. You can sit down, go in a quiet area, table, look them in the eye, and tell them the feedback on their job. And it may not always be good. She was avoiding this. I think I would ask them why they're not coming to work. Like, did you think this was we're on a 4-day work week? Or there's something that's changed. your work isn't getting done, you've had this 21 years of stellar performance, something's going on, I need to know. And some people would say, oh, you can't do that. You can't pry on their personal life. The hell you can't. You're paying them to come to work 5 days a week. So we need, in a nice way, what's going on here? I need to know. Do you need a week off to get this thing taken care of? I had a case where a guy was going on Fridays from North Carolina to New York City because he was in a custody battle with his wife, and she moved. He was trying to get to New York City and back on a weekend, so he missed every Friday. So he said, you're going to lose your job. So he told us why. So we gave him 2 weeks. You got 2 weeks to get this thing straightened out. Then you're on probation. You miss another day in 30 days, you're gone. You know what? He was gone. He couldn't do it. Okay, team 2, scenario 2.
Well, first of all, we weren't remotely surprised that that Star's performance and attendance had declined, because if you're showing up every day or most days and you've got to fill out forms to shuffle papers to comply with stupid policies, then you're probably not going to be very motivated to do a great job. And
well, she's there for the money. It's pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, but money is typically not a great motivator. Other things typically are better. But first of all, in the evaluation, it was a very short evaluation, and we weren't given any details, but there needs to be some objective criteria on the evaluation. That is, was she evaluated based on accuracy rate, time it took, those kinds of things. We need to have something to actually measure on instead of, I don't like what you're doing. That's, if I'm the employee, how do I remedy or fix that? If you don't like what I'm doing, tell me what you don't like about what I'm doing, so that perhaps I can make some changes. We also said that at some point in this organization, Star needs to be informed as to why she's filling out these forms and why these papers need to be shuffled and why these things need to be done. Ostensibly, they have a purpose, so let's communicate what that purpose is, so Star will have some idea of, I'm part of a large organization. What is my part in this organization, and how do I add value to the organization? And the idea that, we're just doing this because somebody told us to is really not very good.
Very good.
And they had many more suggestions.
Well, we thought that the first thing they ought to do is ask her if she, in her experience in this job, had thought of a better way to do it, a faster, easier.
Yes.
And we felt that if she had some input, that maybe she would take responsibility for that job and feel better about it. We also thought that they could possibly cross-train her in another area so that she showed that she had some potential for some movement and she wasn't going to be stuck there forever. And also, I was saying that a job I had before here at UCA, there were several of those jobs like filing and opening mail, and what we did is we rotated. Each person took that was their day to file and that was their day to work for opening mail, and that way no one was stuck with that boring job and we all had that responsibility for it.
Share the drudgery. It's great.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, good job. Hey. Who knows the job better than anyone? Person doing it. So why don't we ask them? Spencer. He's our engineer guy from UAF. Some people call that the university. It's University of Arkansas at Fayetteville.
Okay, so our questions were, if you were Spencer, what would your reaction be? We all basically had the same reaction, which we downgraded to disappointment. We had a different term for it initially. If you were Spencer's boss, what could you do to keep Spencer's performance exceptional? And the next question was, how would you reward top performers? And basically, if we don't have any money, you have to find some other way to acknowledge that person's success. And certainly, if you have a team, public acknowledgement of what they've done, if you have something that lists all your top earners or some other way to show that this person is doing exceptionally well, and let them know you'll explore some opportunities when funds become available and kind of give them some hope in that direction. But some positive statements, accolades, and if you could figure out how to make this happen where it wasn't more work for still less money, if you could take some of Spencer's ideas and incorporate that into what other people are doing and acknowledging him as a leader or her as a leader in that field without adding extra responsibility for still no increase in pay.
Good job. Did anybody pick on that this savings pickup on $187,000 that we didn't have? Surely we could use that for something. Okay.
We kind of had the same idea. What would your reaction be if you were Spencer? Unfortunately, just like we are, you pretty much have to be self-motivated and know that you're doing the best that you can for yourself and for your own career and experience. For his boss to keep him in an excellent performance status is to continue to work with him, as well as continue to provide him support, as well as acknowledgement of his job and how he's doing, and just keep working with him as much as you can, knowing that, letting him know and reassuring that if ever money does come available, that you would work hard to get him some of that. And the same thing with the larger boss of the organization, just recognition. When you can't give money, at least make sure that you give them some sort of recognition of their hard work and appreciation for what they do.
Right. What other ways can you recognize that performance? Good job. 4. This is Emma, our attorney.
The very first question was, what answer would you give to Corleen? And if you've had a chance to read this, doesn't give us a whole lot of detail as far as the education Corleen may have had. And that was one of the points that we noted. Possibly could be a difference in the education.
She's a Harvard attorney.
Emma is the Harvard.
Emma? She's
but it doesn't say anything about Corleen,
right.
For sure. So we were questioning that, the education level that was there. Also could be the current labor market rates, because Corleen had been there for 15 years and this is a new graduate, had only been there for 18 months. Also, it could be the effort and stamina that Corleen may have had in her job and the performance that she had done. Maybe she wasn't what we consider a go-getter and really trying to do the very best that she could, putting the most effort that she could into her job performance. Our second question is, what causes situations like this to occur? Of course, possibly there's no funding. Could be something similar to the prior scenario that we had, even though that there was savings, the $187,000. They just said that there were no money for salary increases.
There was funding for Emma, but not for Corleen.
Right, right. And how would you prevent such wage compression, which is sort of a hard one to answer for me?
Well, wage surveys is the one thing, and of course you can't do that on your own. But if you're big boss, and that's your role here, you're the big boss. This should be a real siren going off, is that you've got that kind of wage compression going on. Emma is at the market. Remember earlier I said there's a market for everything? Maybe there's nothing to do about it, but you have to realize that's a fact. There's a market for everything, and the market for Emma is within $3,000, so what you've been paying your people in there 15 years. Again, for performance, whatever, but if they're doing the same job, then you've got a compression issue. And you may have more than a compression issue if you got the Lily Ledbetter thing coming at you.
Right. Well, and goals and priorities have to be set as far as what you want your employees to be. And it's possible that Emma had very good references and recommendations as an employee, and they wanted her to be one of their best employees, and they wanted her. So.
Right. Recruiting. Good job.
We had a lot of the same thoughts. There could be some discrepancies in, education or job duties and responsibilities. The new employee may have training in a specific area that the veteran employee doesn't have. Also, with the way the market is, that could be an explanation to her as why the salary is so close. It's because the changes in the market. And another thing we talked about, what causes situations like this to occur could be, we looked at the minimum wage scale. An employee could be hired in at $5.15 an hour, and then 5 years later minimum wages change, so their wages get increased to what minimum wage is, but the new employees brought in are also making $7.25 or whatever it's brought in at. So you've got somebody with 5 years of experience that's making the same as the person that just got hired on. So there's situations like that, just the way the system works.
That's a good example to use at the low end, not just the attorney end. Yeah, good. Thank you. The most rewarding part of my job, other than getting to go to basketball games and football and volleyball and without having to pay, is seeing young men like that stand up that are your former students. You see how they're contributing to this organization. It's just this whole thing about a market. Now I know that Graham's sitting back there just shuddering because he's saying, how did they know? Right? Let me tell you, there's no secrets on this campus. There's no secrets at General Motors, and there's no secrets at Kimberly-Clark. You think there is, but there aren't. There's too many people involved with this stuff. So that news gets around. It may not be accurate, but it's telling you something. Okay, number 5. This is another compression issue. Yep. So what you got?
Well, and it took us 5 minutes to read the scenario, so we didn't have time to discuss it. But couple of thoughts we had, I think, is one is kind of looking at intrinsic rewards versus extrinsic rewards. Intrinsic being that to talk to her individually as a supervisor and give her some verbal feedback that we value and appreciate her work and her commitment to the company, so some ongoing feedback, giving her strokes, pats on the back about her work. Secondly, finding ways to reward her in front of her peers, and to find ways when you have group meetings to recognize her achievements in front of her peers, and then also to look at, as a company, to look at some internal non-salary rewards, such as at UCA it might be giving her a parking space or assigning her projects that in the future that she's interested in because she did a great job with the previous project, and perhaps also additional funds for professional travel and professional growth and development. In terms of the, I forgot to mention the questions. One of the questions was, how does an organization avoid this situation? The organization may want to look in the future as of establishing a kind of a bonus structure where she still has a salary cap, but you provide a bonus structure, a one-time bonus for rewarding that kind of behavior. So,
right, one time, a lump sum. Okay.
Our ideas were pretty similar to Gary's and the groups that did the third scenario, but we were not quite clear about what ambiguity there might be about this 6.8% salary adjustment, whether there might be some opportunity for some recategorization of the employee's position that could allow for some financial reward. But, sort of like at UCA, most of us don't have a lot of control over salary. There might be one or two people in the room for whom that would be relevant issues, but most of us can't. We have to work with the system, and it's quite frustrating when that we have to deal with those issues of discontentment over which we don't have control. But one other thing we talked about was perhaps the meeting all expectations wasn't a good evaluation for someone who had been as successful as she had been, and that there might be some re-examination of her work in relationship to those criteria.
Thank you. Yeah, lump sum does not get into your retirement and that sort of thing, but at least it's something. Pats on the back are great. If you haven't had one lately, don't think lowly of them. When's the last time somebody said thank you for what you're doing? Okay, so it does have an impact. But it doesn't buy groceries or fill up your gas tank. So this person maybe should have been recommended by the supervisor for promotion somewhere along the line. But she's probably doing so well they don't want to get rid of her. That's another syndrome. Guy, you're doing a great job. We would never want you to leave. The 6.8, I knew you weren't familiar with pools, but that's kind of the way it works. 6.8 is awful large for today's business, but you take last year's base salaries, multiply by a percentage that the CEO and board of trustees, not board of trustees, board of directors approves a pool, and then every manager is given the responsibility and authority and accountability to take his or her pool and spread it out how they see fit. But that's the pool, 6.8% of the base. But the person that's reached the top of their salary rate they're in the calculation, but they're not in the payout. So you can give more money to more than 6.8 to someone other than Yomi in your department. Okay, 6.
Our group immediately saw, one of the questions was, what issues will employees in the department have with Janice's decision? And really, Janice is new, and if evaluations are due in 30 days, that means she's probably just been around for a little amount of time, and Fred's been the supervisor for the last 11 months, okay? And it really should be Fred who's doing the evaluation, so there'd be concern that here comes Janice and doesn't know much about our work and now is evaluating us for the entire year. Kind of combining the next two questions, what is another option for the timely completion of the evals, and if you were big boss, what action, if any, would you take towards Janice? We thought that really big boss should ask Fred and Janice to collaborate, to work together. This would help Janice in the time pinch she feels that she's adapting to the new job. Fred should act a little bit as a mentor to her in how the process, and give her some training in preparing her to work in her new role. So having them collaborate on doing those evaluations was our solution.
Good job.
Our group was pretty much the same way, but the one thing that was, what issues will employees in the department have with Janice's decision? Well, it delays their money. That's the big thing. So we were the same way. They should work together with Fred. Janice should work with Fred, or Fred's boss should help Janice to complete the evaluations on time.
Good job. You need to have a little come to Jesus meeting with Janice. That's not a good way to start out in that department or any department, is by delaying. People know when their time is up, if they're all doing it at the same time, especially. Some companies still use anniversary date, so you have evaluations due all the time, and then somebody makes this decision like, oh no, we're all going to do it on July 1st. So some people get a short one and some people get a long one. But Janice doesn't take this seriously. She's going to delay this by 60 days, and you don't do that. It should be sacred, and you make it sacred by doing what you say it is. I had a 6-month rule. If Fred supervised this person for over 6 months, Fred's got to do that evaluation when it comes due. Right or wrong? If Janice sits him for 6 months or more, then Janice is going to do it with the collaboration of Fred. Okay, but she may not think that Cletus is so hot. You know, maybe she doesn't go fishing with Cletus. She's not married to Grandma Sue, which is or married. She's not a sister of Grandma Sue, who's Cletus is. There's all kinds of stuff that could be in there. But number one, you don't delay it. And the second thing is maybe Fred should do that. Okay? One more, and then we'll, there's more of these things. Is anybody just burning to get up here and do theirs? Okay. Then let's do, we already talked about Grandma Sue. Here we go, let's do 8.
Our group basically had some snide comments to make before we got serious about this, but the first thing that we recommend is that Candy actually review her employment policy, if she has one, to see if there's anything in that policy that would prevent her from, you know, doing this exotic dancing on the side, if it's competitive with the existing business that she's working, or if there's a clause in her employment contract, then she may have a true issue here. If not, if the employment contract does not stipulate that this is out of line, then we recommend that she discuss one-on-one with her supervisor the fact that what she does on her personal time really should not be a part of his decision and her performance evaluation. And if she doesn't receive any satisfaction there, we would recommend that Candy go to HR to review and discuss this situation.
Yeah, good job. Did anybody else see something in that last line? Yeah. If it's, you know, Lou's behavior includes acceptable behavior, going there and watching Candy, and I did not write this in the last 48 hours, honest. I wrote this a month ago, because this was the deal, is we had people saying, Doug, you can't let that girl work here. Why not? Well, because I saw her in that strip club down in the you know, in the south end of Asheville, North Carolina. I said, oh, how often do you go there? Oh yeah. Well, you can't let her. Why not? Well, it's just not right. Why not? Does she perform well? Pull out her last performance review. She show up on time every day? She's one of your top performers, have high quality, high customer service, always gives you great ideas for continuous improvement? Yeah. Okay, then don't cross the line. You pay people for performance. Now, what they do outside of here, unless you say it's some kind of a contract, or if you make, you know, if you're in the newspaper every day and probably isn't showing light on the, but that's a, or I don't like the way they wear their hair. I don't like who they sleep with. I don't like the color of their skin. I don't think they should work here. They're different. Well, they may be different, but they're doing their job. Focus on performance. Okay, these are some do's. You don't have to do any of this stuff. I'm a volunteer. You don't have to do any of this stuff. I'm not anybody's boss. Not even at home. Okay? Do make evaluation process sacred. If you really believe that performance evaluation is important, it's the most important thing you can do, and it's a very difficult thing to do, and that's the least you owe to your workers is to sit down and tell them, you know, it's maybe half an hour out of a whole year. Is that too much to ask? Next, begin the process 30 days in advance. Should be more, but I'll take 30. Send out self-evaluation form. I don't know if we use those, but you should. Let the employee evaluate themselves. Most of them will evaluate themselves more difficult, harder on themselves than you would be, because they remember the bad stuff that they didn't do. Keep a folder on every employee. Put good stuff in there, as well as the not so good stuff. Send out the self-evaluation form. Review the previous year's evaluation. Start with that. What's it say? Were they supposed to make some improvements? Did you have a plan where you were going to give them resources, meaning time and money, to go take some kind of a seminar to improve so they can do the performance that you asked them to do? Did you hold up your end of the bargain? Did they hold up their end of the bargain? If you have management by objectives, how many of them did they meet? Then review that improvement plan, which is kind of like management by objectives. What is it they were supposed to do? Then you review the self-evaluation and go work in a quiet place. I did mine at home. And you may say, not going to do that. Well, it was different. I was working in a really fast-paced factory environment and had a lot of things going on all the time. So the best time for me to do it was on weekends. Did it at home, quiet. Complete review, including documentation. consider using 360 evaluations. Self-evaluation, people I work with, the people I work for, and the people that work for me. Very interesting. Find out what all the people around you, 360 degrees. If you can't do that, then you can't do that. Prepare improvement plan if it's needed. Conduct closed-door review. Document, document, document. If something goes on in that meeting that's important, you better record it. Not recording, but document it. Write it down. Do catch workers doing things right. Foster continuous improvement in all processes. If we just keep doing the same stuff over and over and over and expect different results, what's that the definition of? Yeah, insanity. Yeah, you've been in my classes. Okay, don't treat this process lightly or as drudgery. If you're treating this as drudgery, you shouldn't be supervising people. Period. You wouldn't like it if your boss treated you that way. Don't be late, like those, putting it off. Do not allow a recent bad event or good event to dominate the 12-month evaluation. We're humans. The most recent thing, if you have 25 people working for you, and you don't keep records, and you don't have a file on every one of them, you're going to think of the last event, and that's going to sway it one way or another. Don't allow any interruptions during evaluation. If you have to leave the premises to do it, if that's what's required, don't let anybody come in, because that's telling, oh, hold on a second, I've got a call here, or, well, yeah, come on in, it's okay, I'm just evaluating old Joe here. So don't do that. Don't wait for annual evaluations if employees' behavior needs changing now. Like, well, they're coming up in June, I'll just wait. I'll wait to find out why they're not coming in every Friday. Don't create expectations of salary increases. There may not be any money to give. Don't rate everyone you supervise as superior. What do they call that? The halo effect. Don't do that unless you've been told that your department is just the best there is on the whole planet. Because if everybody's rated superior, you either ought to be promoting them or you should be promoted. Don't avoid uncomfortable feedback. I think we got a whole generation or two that their parents avoided it, from what I see. Don't allow continuation of unsatisfactory performance. Prepare and issue an improvement plan that may include probation and follow-up in 30 days. That doesn't have to be at the annual review, evaluation, but it certainly is a minimum or maximum amount of time to wait. Don't allow continuation of unsatisfactory performance. If you do, then that is interpreted as being satisfactory. Closing remarks, 2 more pages. If I hurry, I can beat the bell. What non-monetary rewards? Many of you touched on that. I'll make a dangerous statement. Most of you are not working here because of the money. You can roll that around your head. Okay? What non-monetary rewards? How about thank you? When's the last time you heard it? When's the last time you heard good job? I need you. I know you've been waiting to take your grandkids to Disney World, but I got to have you here during spring break. I really need you. How can UCA give recognition without adjusting base salaries? That's the big challenge for Board of Trustees on down. Okay? We make light of it, but it's a reality, but there's things we can do. Do we have service awards banquet? If there is, I've missed one for the last 12 years. Or didn't get invited. Maybe that's a message I ought to think about. Do we have them? Hello? We do? Okay, how do you get invited? How do you get invited to a service award banquet? But do we get in? But it isn't like we're going to recognize everybody's got 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, the watches. No? It's just kind of like a... Okay. I'm thinking of a different model. A big deal. On one-time cash bonus, which we did, thankfully. That was great. Okay. Subsidized health care premiums. We've done that. I don't know if you appreciated that or even knew it. But Graham, in a group that he works with, I won't say they fought, but they certainly stressed it to the upper management and the Board of Trustees that, look, the least we can do is try to hold the line on these health care premiums. It's the #1 cost after salaries. It's huge. It is for every employer. And we don't know what's coming in 2014, but health care is critical. And as your workforce gets older, it becomes a bigger and bigger part. So Graham and his group worked with the Board of Trustees and got the last two increases offset with nothing, no pay increase. The Board of Trustees found money somewhere and covered our last two increases. And probably most in here saying, I didn't know that. So that's real money. You never saw it, but it's real money you were going to have to pay if you didn't do it. And this year, again, Graham's leadership on this is that he saw it's a $10 million expense, right? 10 million here, 10 million there. Pretty soon it adds up to $162 million. That's our budget for this year. So that was a big help. Next is free parking. It's only what, 60 bucks, 70 bucks? It used to be 40 bucks. But why not look at that? Do we really need, you know what parking, how big a business parking is on this campus? $1 million revenue. So they probably don't want to give that up. Not all parking, there's also tickets in there. Okay. Negotiate discounts with merchants. We have a critical mass here of 1,300 and some people that is a buying group that we're not leveraging. We are insurance, that's for sure, but we could do it with something. Why not get half off on oil changes if 1,300 people want to go to the Quick Lube, or even $5, something. $100 cafeteria voucher per semester. 200 bucks, but it's 200 more than you had. Tickets to Reynolds Performance. We get some of those, but maybe we come in and have a really big outfit come in here, and it's only for employees one night. Okay? Or a bottle of Coke. First day we go to Coke, it should be free. Okay, my hour is up. Thanks for coming. I know there's other things you could do today.
I have the responsibility today, though, to talk about the performance evaluation form and that process. And I'm gonna start out by saying, if I was devising a performance evaluation form, and I'm just going to be honest, this is not the form that I would devise. Okay. Unfortunately, we are, as state employees, especially classified employees, are under the Office of Personnel Management. And just by law, we have to use this form. So I want to set the record straight on that. It's not the best form. For us, it may be more applicable to people who work for a regular state agency, but it is what it is, and we have to deal with it. In your handout material, since it is an OPM form, I have attached the form in your handout, and I have also attached the actual PE training that OPM actually goes through with their state agencies, because it would not be very helpful if I did my own when it doesn't apply to this form. So I'm going to follow their training material. I'm going to hit the highlights. You can read through it all. It's in your handout. I also want to say, starting off, that that this form is for the classified employees only. It is not for non-classified employees. However, we do encourage evaluations of your non-classified employees, and there are certain things in this form that you can use. It's not to say that you cannot use it. You certainly could, but you may pick up some ideas and some of the other helpful hints from this form. There's a new form being developed that will be released soon. It's not a major change. I've already looked at it. We'll be putting it out on the website soon. Hopefully it'll be where you can go in and you can complete the form online and then you can just print it. But that will be coming soon. So let's get started. First we have the rating forms. Now there has been some migration over the period of time. As you'll see in your handout, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but our form that we have right now, which a good reason why OPM is going to introduce a brand new form, has not been revised since 2003. And actually, the changes in the new form are not that substantial. There'll be still the same options here, but hopefully they have simplified it a little bit, and hopefully that'll be a help to you. But that'll be coming soon. Under the rating forms, if you'll look in your handout, you'll see Arkansas Performance Evaluation Plan Policies and Procedures. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this. This is something that you can read, but I want to highlight some things. First of all, it's an annual evaluation. But there's one thing I want to emphasize here. If you're having a performance issue in your staff, do not wait until the annual evaluation to address it. Because an annual evaluation covers 12 months. If you're having an issue in the first 3 months or the second 3 months, and you wait 6 months afterwards or 9 months afterwards to address the issue, that's not going to help. If you're having a performance issue that is below acceptable standards, they're not hitting the satisfactory performance, you need to address that at the time it happens. We talked about that in the previous sessions about putting people, if we have to, on probation and things like that. But you do not have to wait till the annual evaluation. It also should be based on observable behavior. It is very critical that however you evaluate someone, it is something that you have observed, not on hearsay, it's not on other things like that, it's something that has been observed directly by the supervisor. The whole performance evaluation needs to be understood by the employee. In other words, when you hire someone or you promote someone, you need to sit down, take the time, and we'll talk about some details on that in just a minute. But you need to let them know on the front end what the expectations are. I heard Doug talk about the self-evaluation. I've seen people, and I've used this before, where when it comes time for evaluation, I tell the employee to evaluate themselves. And then I'll do an evaluation, and then we'll come together and we'll walk through it. The majority of the times that I have done that, I generally have given the employee a higher rating than they have given themselves. That's not uncommon, but it gives you a framework to have a discussion about performance. Also, it must be approved by the supervisor and reviewing official. That may be your department head, but it is important that not only the employee and the supervisor understand it, but the reviewing official understands it. So when it comes time for evaluation, there's no questions, it's understood, and everybody's on the same page. In the OPM's information, it says if the evaluation is unacceptable, then the employee should be placed on probation. I have a little disagreement with that, because I go back to my first one of my first comments was, if you've got an underperforming employee that you think is headed toward that direction, you do not need to wait till the evaluation date to let them know. That being said, if you're at the 11th month mark, maybe the 10th month mark and things, then it may be acceptable to do that. But that's going to be a judgment call on the supervisor. But overall, you should not hold off to the evaluation to have to deal with an underperforming issue. The evaluation, the employee has the right to appeal the evaluation. That would go to the reviewing official. Also, and this is indicated on the form, just because the employee signs the form does not mean they agree with the evaluation. There's a comment section on the form for the employee to complete if they choose to do so. However, the evaluation has to take place and it has to be signed. But again, just because it is signed does not mean agreement. Who takes part? This is pretty simple. You have the employee who's going to be rated, you have the supervisor who's going to do the rating, and you have the reviewing official. Again, these are 3 steps in the process. So when you have to set the standards ahead of time, whether it's a brand new employee, someone that you've promoted, or you're revising the job standards, as Doug said, that should be done, then all 3 people are in agreement, so that when the time the evaluation takes place, at least everybody's in consensus on what's being evaluated, and there are no surprises. 4 steps in performance evaluation. Now, this is not on the actual performance evaluation form, but is in the OPM material that I have in your handout. I'm going to talk about some of these. I don't exactly agree with the language or the explanations on some of the items that OPM puts in there. I'm not throwing them under the bus. I'm just saying this was written for 15,000 state employees, and when you do that, it's hard to come up with a form that's going to fit that, because all state agencies, all state employees that are in the classified system are evaluated under this form. You need to identify the job task. Now, this is what is to be done. It's not the how part. It's what is to be done. So when you have a position as a supervisor, and you can, if it's an employee that you've had here for a while, there's nothing wrong with sitting down with that employee and saying, would you write out what you perceive are your job tasks? And I'll do the same, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. Again, the idea is to build consensus. Ultimately, it is your responsibility as a supervisor, and you've got the final call on this. But if you're going to have a good supervisor-employee relationship, then it is helpful to have agreement in what the job tasks are. Identify the duty areas. Now, this is listed as step number 2. It could be step 1. It's going to depend on your operation and the positions within your department. I have seen, and there's no scientific way here. I have personally tried to establish the duty areas at the start instead of the job task. Because a lot of the positions that I have in our office are by duty, that's the predominant area. Then we develop the job task under that. So you can do these in any order. It really does not matter. But on the evaluation form, the job duty is what you're going to put down. The job tasks are just a sidebar reference that you have developed with the employee to agree that these are the things that are going to be done. You need to identify performance indicators. And this describes what is to be done. This is more of an action sentence. You'll usually see it start with adverbs, but it describes what is going to be done. Just kind of let me go back to the duty areas just real quick. I want to highlight something within there. There should be at least 3, but not more than 6. Okay, you don't want to have too small a group, but you don't want to have a real large group. So just remember that. Again, going back to the performance indicators, it's about what is to be done. And again, you usually use an action sentence. There's some examples in your headline, in your outline. The example they use in there happens to be a position in HR. But, it talks about, it has the duty area, then it has the duty area with a performance indicator. For example, the duty area in your handout is performs a job analysis. And in with the performance indicator is quickly, according to direction, and properly. Now those are pretty general, I understand that. Depending on the position, you can be more specific. And in a minute I'm going to talk about how to do that. But you need a performance indicator in order to make the evaluation. And then it all comes down to the identifying the performance standard. And this defines the satisfactory level of performance. And as Doug talked about, and I get this, I've been in state government all my life. When we're in an era like we are and have been the last several years, and we don't have anniversary increases anymore, we don't have the merit raises anymore, it is hard for you as a supervisor to do an evaluation for an individual who you've had in your department a long time, done a good job, or maybe hadn't even been there a long time. You have a tendency to say, well, at the minimum, I can give them an exceptional evaluation. Well, as Doug said, this isn't the place to do this. You really need to focus on the performance when you do the evaluation, and you think about other ways to reward that individual outside of this procedure. In your department, you can be creative with things. I know that Doug put a lot of things on there that would be hard to do, but you can use your creativity to let your employees understand that you do value their performance when they do a very good job, but you don't want to take this form and just automatically give them an exceptional performance. Because when you do that, the other thing is there's no place for them to go. If you're saying they're already there, then there's no, and we all can improve, all of us. I know for me individually, I I have things that kind of tend to motivate what I do. I just like to be told every now and then, hey, you're doing a good job. But if I'm not doing a good job, I still want to be told. Because I want to be told, okay, if I'm not doing a good job, how can I do better? Not just, well, you're not doing a good job, I'm gonna let it go and I'm gonna find other ways to compensate for that. That's not the way, and I'm not saying everybody does that, but that has happened before. But you need to let your employees know if they're doing a good job. You need to set the standards accordingly. But you don't need to overrate them just because we're in this situation where we're not giving anniversary increases. Although I understand that thought when that happens. The other thing that you want to do when you are doing this on the performance standards, they need some qualifiers. So in other words, if they are exceeding the standards, and I'm sorry the pages aren't in this handout, they don't have numbers on them, but it's under how to write job standards using the sentences that give you a measure or a qualifier. The important thing to do here is that you let the employee know what the measurement is. For example, as they use here under the accuracy and the quality, receives X number of valid document complaints per year. If you're in a position where you're providing a customer service to the campus and a lot of your job depends on providing information and everything like that, well, what's acceptable? What's the number of complaints are acceptable? Is it 3? Is it 5? Because if I go to evaluate someone and I say, well, I've heard some complaints about the way you do this, but I do that 80% of my time and the number of complaints are only 3, that might be pretty good. But if I'm performing an area that I'm providing that service and I'm only doing that 20% of the time, and you have 10 complaints on that person, then that tells you you need to address it. But if you let them know in the beginning what the qualifiers are, then they're going to understand that. If you don't let them know in the beginning, then you come to do the evaluation, and then you throw that on them, then they're going to, at that point they're going to say, well, you didn't give me a number, or you didn't tell me how many. Now, this is probably not the best example in the world because a lot of the things we do, it's hard to put some qualifiers on, so they don't always have to be numeric. You can use other things. But when you set a performance standard that you're going to measure, it is important that you have some kind of qualifier so everyone agrees when it comes time for evaluation, these are the rules of the game. And don't surprise them with the rules of the game when they walk in for their evaluation. I want to emphasize that when you set the standards and you have the duties described and you have the qualifiers and all of that, remember on the performance evaluation form, you do this hopefully 1 year out. At the time they're hired, the employee signs off on it and they get a copy. I know it goes in your supervisory file maybe it goes in their personnel file at that time. That's fine. But the employee needs a copy to have in their possession so they'll know this is what we've agreed on. This is not to be punitive at all, but this is to be open and transparent with your employee so they'll understand and they sign off on what is expected of them. Okay, you've got another section in your handout from OPM that refers to about the monitoring and the documentation. as Doug said, you've got to document. That's going to be what's going to that's going to be the biggest thing in your favor at the time of an evaluation, especially if there's some disagreement. Don't go by memory. Don't go by, well, you remember back 8 months ago when you did this and things like that. You need to document along the way. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. If you're having a performance issue along the way and it's to the level where it's not hitting expectations, you need to deal with it at that time. Now, it doesn't automatically mean that it'll put the employee on the probation, because our policy says, as we discussed in the other series, you do the oral warning first, even if it's a performance issue. You, as Doug also said, you let the employee know how they can improve. How can they get to where they meet the satisfactory performance? An improvement plan, whatever you want to call it. You can't just call the employee in and say, hey, you're not doing this. You need to let them know how they can. You may be surprised with the feedback you get from them, that from the feedback you may find there's an issue there that you weren't aware of that might be preventing the employee from doing that. So again, that interaction is only going to help you as a supervisor, especially if there comes time down the road where there's some disagreement on performance. You also need to monitor activities and not attitudes. And this is a hard one, because if an employee has a bad attitude, in your estimation, but are doing their job, they are, like you have your task, and they're checking the task off, and they're doing their job. When you have to deal with the attitude, that is a disciplinary issue you're dealing with, not a performance issue. And as you look in our handbook, and we talked again in the last 2 sessions, that falls under the disciplinary action in the handbook and not the performance action. It is very hard to separate the two, especially when you're in a customer service operation. And you certainly can't afford to have anyone that has a bad attitude. But if they are performing the task and they're providing, say, the information, but they're doing it what is a bad attitude in your mind, you need to call them in at the time it's happening. You need to give them the oral warning. Make sure you have it, that some type of documentation that you had the conversation and that you're going to continue to monitor it. You don't have to wait till the next evaluation to handle something like that. But sometimes it's hard sometimes to cross the line between what's a disciplinary action and what's a performance action. If you ever need help, you can give me a call, talk to Katie Henry, and also we'll be glad to help you. You need to make your file that you have on your employee, it needs to be accessible to the employee if they want to see it, but it needs to be confidential. You do your evaluations, even your employee conversations about any type of discipline, whatever it is, performance or maybe disciplinary, you do it behind closed doors. Sometimes you may want to invite the reviewing official in as a third party. That's a judgment call depending on what the issue is. But don't do it as a punitive measure. If the situation has escalated between the supervisor and the employee to where there's arguing or something like that, if there's no resolution to that between the two of you, then you may want to bring in the reviewing official. But that's going to be a judgment call for you. You need to describe all the levels of performance. As we said, when you set the job standards, you're setting it for satisfactory performance, okay? And that's why it's important to add the qualifiers. So if you're going to rate someone above average, exceptional, or not meeting expectations, then you need to describe what those levels are, okay? Because I may have a different opinion than the person I'm supervising of what exceeds those standards. So you need to have that discussion with them. Don't be too concerned about over-documenting. I would rather you over-document than under-document. We can deal with over-documentation. We can't deal with under-documentation. So if you're going to err on one side or the other, please err on the over-documentation. The other highlight I read out of it, and I'm not going to go over them all, is this is not an I got you system. Okay? This is not to set some, and I'm not saying we set people up to fail, but we're all human beings. And let's face it, there are certain employees in our office, because of our nature and their nature, we tend to use what click with, you know, over others. That's just human nature, and that's going to happen. We're not robots. But when it comes to performance and evaluating performance, as a supervisor, you've got to do the best you can do to kind of separate that out of the equation. Because if you don't, and you have a tendency to evaluate those that you kind of click with a little better higher than those that you don't click with, then what's the message to those? Oh, I've got to get in with the boss. Well, there are a lot of people that don't want to get in with the boss. They want to come do their job. They want to get their paycheck. They want to help the university all they can, and then they want to go home. And so you got to kind of watch that when you have a lot of people in your office, especially, because that can happen. But this is not to say you shouldn't have friendship with your employees. But when you do that, you've got to guard yourself on being objective at the time of the evaluation. And you've got to take into account that, yes, I may be friends with this person I'm evaluating, and I'm not friends, say, outside with this person, but I have to evaluate each of them, and they both know that. The person who's not friends with you in that type of situation, believe me, they know what the relationship is with you and the other employee. They've watched it, they see it. It's not that it's wrong if it doesn't go too far, but you've got to watch that. There's a lot of other items here under the monitoring. I think they list about 15 of them. You can read through that at your convenience and see if they apply. I want to talk about some radar errors, and I know that Doug talked some about this. There's one called the contrast effect, and again, it's in your handout here. They list a definition. This is when you compare your employees to others. Okay, I've got this employee over here. I'm going to give them, they're really good at what they do, so I'm going to give them an above average. And I've got this employee over here. They're not they're not doing the job that this person is doing, but then you got to back up and say, wait a minute, but they're not doing the same job. So you got to evaluate the person based on their standards, not on how well they're doing their job compared to someone else in the office. Because there are jobs in our organization that are harder to do than others. And that may be the determining factor. So you've got to watch, and you don't want to be perceived as someone who falls into this category. The other is the first or last impression. you've got to look at their performance over time. You hire someone, you promote someone, they come in, they do a really great job right out of the gate. But then something happens along the way. Maybe the job gets a little more complicated. It could be a number of things. And then their performance, but boy, it comes time to evaluation, and you think back, well, boy, when they first started, they really do a good job. Well, you need to talk to them about that. You need to say, hey, in your first 3 months, I noticed you were doing this, but the next 3, I'm concerned. Can you tell me what's going on? But you need to factor that into the evaluation. On the same note, if they get off to a bad start, don't jump to the conclusion that they're going to be a bad employee. Higher ed, as you know, when we hire people from outside of higher ed, for the most part, there's an adjustment period. We just do things differently, right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not saying they're good or bad. We just operate a little differently than the private sector. I think that Doug would say we operate a lot differently from the private sector on his experience. But we do operate a lot differently. Our culture is different. Our semantics are different. So sometimes it takes an employee a little time to get going. As you know, a classified employee, when they're hired or promoted, they're under the 90-day probationary period. That's automatic. So you got that on your side if they're not performing well. And that also reminds me that when you do hire a new employee under the classification system, you need to remind them that or promote that the first 3 months are a probationary period. You don't need to spring that on them if they're not doing a good job, and you call them in and you say, oh, by the way, you're on probation if you didn't know that. Because if you don't tell them, they don't know. Our office tries to get that out, but a lot of times that's not understood. Then you got the halo effect. Of course, that's the one Doug talked about, where if they're good in an area, they're good in everything. And we're all, that's an easy one to do, but that's the one that you have to guard yourself. I like to weight the duty areas. For example, I have a classified employee, and I do my duty areas and I do my standards. And let's say I have 3 duty areas. Well, they're not always equal. 33%, 33%, 33%. So I try to establish some weighting to the evaluation. If they do this, if I'm in agreement with, if the employee and I are in agreement, this counts 50% of the time, this accounts, to just make it equal 25%, and the other duty area accounts for 25%, then I need to take that into consideration when I do the evaluation. For example, in the 50% area, if they're really doing a good job, but in the other 2 areas they have an area of deficiency, then I need to take that into consideration. But on the opposite end, if the 50% area is where they're not doing a good job, then I'm going to need to have a conversation, because although they may be doing good in the other 2, they're not always equal. The 3 areas are not always equal. So all your job duty areas, you need to establish them, obviously, with the priority of what's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and all of that. And when you do the evaluation, you need to take that into consideration. Another one to consider is the similar to me. I would do that job this way. Well, and I think my staff will tell you, I try to I tell them where the end is and where we're trying to get to, what the goals are, but I try to let them do it within certain parameters, because it can get done more efficiently than the way I would do it. That's the drawback. If I expect them to do it the way I do it, and they still meet the goal, but I hire them to do the job, and through their creativity, they find a better way to do it, and I'm involved in that. As long as that happens, I'm all for it, because I want them to have ownership in what they're doing. I want them to have ownership in trying to meet the goals of our department and our university. And that's a way you can do that, is to allow them, especially if you hire someone that is extremely creative, extremely on the ball, and they come up with something a little different but can get the same results or maybe even better, then let them do it, even though it may not be the way that I would do it, or maybe the way it would be done by you. There's the central tendency error, and some people call this the chicken error, where you just rate everybody the same way. You just don't want to take any chances. You don't want to create any problem. So I'm going to give everybody in there the same rating. We're all good. We're all the same. And everybody knows that's not true. So that is an easy way out. And it is especially an easy way out in times where we're not giving increases, we're not giving the merit increases on the anniversary dates. That is an easy way out, but it's really not the right thing to do, because again, and I want to go back, ultimately we're talking about performance here. We're not talking about salary increases. We're not talking about those things. We're talking about how can we improve performance. And I'm convinced that the majority of individuals we hire want to be a very good performer. If you get up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror and you got to get ready and go to work and drive to work and deal with all the other things you got in your life, one of the satisfactions you have control over is how you perform your job. And to me, that's a big satisfier, even in times where we don't get increases. So it's an easy way out, but you don't want to fall into that trap, because there may come a day, I hope so, I don't know, where we get back to where our classified employees do get anniversary increases. And then if you all of a sudden change the rules of the game now, and somebody that's been getting a good evaluation all the way through because there was no money attached to it, now that there's money attached to it and you change the evaluation, then we've got a problem. But I realize, and I do get it, it's a hard thing to do in the era that we're in. The final one that they mention is the negative and the positive leniency, and that's you continue to evaluate the person either at the low end or the high end, and there's nothing in between, or there isn't a combination. As I said before, we all can improve. And there's not an area that I'm responsible for that when I'm evaluated, I can't be told, here's something you need to improve on. That's not punitive. It's not a negative. You let the person know the things they're doing well, but you also need to let them know what they can improve on. You got to give them a goal. Again, no salary, nothing else. It helps for employees to have a goal. I've got a little quiz here. I'm going to let you look at the quiz. It's on the last page of your handout before the questions, and it gives some scenarios for you to identify the rating area. I want to leave some time for questions, so I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to look through this, and then I'm going to give you the answers, and you can see how well you did. I just want to close by, again, I want to thank y'all for being here. I know to a lot of you this may be redundancy. The whole idea behind the supervisor skills training is to offset issues that may come up in the future. Again, you've heard us say this is something we have never done here for UCA, but my first couple years, my first year here and first year and a half was it occurred to the administration that we were having issues in the supervisor-employee relations area, and we just felt like it was a good idea just to go over some things as a review. We want to prevent adverse actions from happening. We want to prevent problems, and that's the purpose behind this. So I appreciate your patience, even though for some of you this may be redundant, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.